And you can pin Sarah Dubov as the main speaker. Enjoy.
Okay, good evening, ladies. It's lovely to see you here, some in person, some in a box, but lovely to see you all here. It is an honor and pleasure to be opening this very special series entitled Empowering Marriage Through Mikvah, a series of 4 talks designed to enhance our knowledge, love, and appreciation for this most beautiful and sacred mitzvah. I'd like to thank all the women involved in Mikvah UK, a grassroots homegrown organization which promotes Taharat HaMishpacha, family purity, and Mikvah. And in particular, to our gracious host, Ilana Diamond, thank you, Ilana, who as a labor of love, I can't describe it any other way, dedicates time and energy to promoting Mikvah observance, and who so devotedly arranged this series of talks. Thank you, Ilana. So I'd like to cast your mind back to the last Jewish wedding you attended. It could be that it was over a year or more ago before lockdown, or perhaps it was a bit more recent now that COVID restrictions have somewhat eased. But whether on Zoom, live stream, or in person, Jewish weddings often share a common theme. Of course, there's the magic of the moments under the chuppah, but we will all agree that when it comes to this mitzvah, we absolutely go to town. Caterers, flowers, a band, a color scheme, gorgeous dresses, matching ties, photographer, relatives, need I say more, relatives coming from far and near, etc., etc. And the celebrations don't just last one night, they actually last a week long with Sheva Brachot, with a week's festivities. You know, it would have been a whole lot easier and a whole lot cheaper. After meeting, a nice guy and a girl decide to meet and they decide to get married. It would have been so much easier for a young couple to simply make an appointment with the rabbi, sign on the dotted line, say a l'chaim, open a bottle of champagne, have a piece of cake, go home, and voila, they're married. And yet we tend to make a huge fuss over wedding celebrations. Why is this so? I mean, it's only one of 613 mitzvot. There are 612 others, and we don't seem to go to such an extreme for the other ones. So what makes a Jewish wedding so incredibly special? Now, in the Kabbalah, it actually answers this question, and there are 2 distinct answers given. The Zohar tells us, the Zohar was a chief work of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who founded Kabbalah, and he writes as follows. He says, you know, in heaven, there's a big treasure chest full of souls. And one fine day, God plucks a soul out of the treasure box and he decides to dispatch it to this world. So it goes on a journey through various stages. But before God sends it off, God gets a little creative and he splices this soul in half. Half he puts into a little baby boy being born. And the other half he puts maybe a few years earlier or maybe a few years later into a little baby girl being born. These 2 individuals could be next door neighbors or they could live on opposite sides of the ocean. But they're born into their respective families. They grow up, they get the education and the upbringing that they do. And when the time is right, and by divine providence, God engineers that these 2 individuals should meet. And each couple has their own story. But they meet and they talk, and they feel a bond between them, or the beginning of a bond, and there's something perhaps they can't describe that's attracting them to one another. So they decide to get married. And they spend months or however long preparing, both physically, as we described at length, for the wedding celebrations, and also spiritually. And finally, after many months of preparing, they find themselves standing under the chuppah. The Zohar says that what happens under the chuppah is not just a union between two separate individuals, but in fact, it's a reunion. It is a reunion between two halves of one soul. And in fact, these two individuals are soulmates. And that is the source of the incredible joy and happiness. In Chassidut, in Hasidic teachings, one of the Chabad Rebbes, called Rabbi Dov of Lubavitch, known as the Mitzvah Rebbe, writes, he describes it in a similar way, but with a different twist. He says, the bride and groom under the chuppah are like two long lost friends who haven't seen each other in years, and they are so delighted to see each other. The joy is just immense. You know, when my kids were young, on Passover, they had a cute trick that they would play on us. They would take a matzah, they would crack it in half, and then they would put the two halves together, and they would say, "Mommy, can you see the crack?" And often I couldn't. It looked like a complete matzah. Under the chuppah, there's no crack anymore. They fuse with the wedding with the blessings, with the encirclements of the bride around the groom, or whatever the custom is. The divine energy fuses them as one whole, and they emerge as literally as one spiritual unit. And that is the source of the bond between a husband and wife. Now, you know, in Judaism, there's a very interesting concept. Again, Kabbalistically, there's a concept whereby anything that happens spiritually is reflected in a physical way. So, for example, I'll just give you two very brief examples. In the Garden of Eden, when Adam and Eve ate of the tree of knowledge, automatically we see that thorns and thistles were going to start growing, and different other challenges that they would face in life. And rather than just viewing it as, quote unquote, a punishment, what actually happened was, because they fell in spiritual stature, and because they became a bit imperfect spiritually, because now the other inclination would now, the opposite of good was now inside of them, because they were imperfect physically, the world simply reflected that. But let me give you a positive example, which is always much nicer. When the Jewish people were standing at Mount Sinai, an incredible thing happened. It says they had a very sensory experience. And miraculously, anybody that was blind was able to see. Anybody that was previously unable to hear was suddenly able to hear. Anyone that was lame was, it says they stood at the mountain. And the commentaries say that miraculously, don't forget they were in Egypt, many of them had handicaps. Suddenly, bingo, God waves his magic wand and suddenly everyone is whole again. Now, there are a few ways of viewing this experience. It could be that God just wanted them to have an extrasensory experience and fully enjoy it. But again, spiritually, in Egypt, they had been worshiping idols. They were spiritually imperfect. And when, after 49 days of a lot of spiritual work, they arrived at Mount Sinai, spiritually, they were healed inside. So this simply was manifest spiritually, physically. Again, this is not a measuring stick, God forbid, for someone who is handicapped, but when it happens to a nation of nearly 3 million people, it must mean something deeper is going on. So we have this concept of something that's spiritual is reflected physically. Indeed, after the chuppah, the most magical moment is when, after the dinner and after the dancing and after all the celebrations, when the couple finally go home and they are intimate with each other, this is the true magic. This is the true union. And what happens is that their bodies are simply reflecting a union that happened under the chuppah. Just as their souls united, now their bodies are uniting in intimacy. And many pages and many volumes have been written in Jewish in Jewish literature and in Jewish studies about the beauty and the special atmosphere that takes place when a couple is intimate. In fact, it says that when a couple, and these are the words that are used, when a couple unite in great passion and love and attraction to one another, and there's a great passion and erotica between them, and they are truly feel like one unit, that in fact is when God's presence rests between them and blesses the couple. Many people think, that Jews just get married to have kids, but in fact, that's not so. There's a mitzvah to have kids, that's true, but there's a separate mitzvah in the Torah just to be intimate, to express that unity and love between the couple. And in fact, there's the Torah enjoins the husband to provide, specifically the husband, to provide extra affection and closeness and towards his wife. So we see from here that intimacy is a very special moment in Judaism. It's something that's highlighted and something that's very special. In fact, when my kids went to nursery, every single one of them brought home the same arts and crafts project every year. So they went to nursery and they came back with a picture of the Bet HaMikdash, the Holy Temple. Now, in the temple of years ago, they had many different objects. And the saying goes that the Holy Temple is reflected in our homes. So they would draw certain objects and say, how does that correspond to my home? So for example, in the Bet HaMikdash, there was a wash basin known as the Kior, where the Kohanim, the priests, would wash their hands and feet before doing the service. So of course, they would make a little picture of that, and next to it, they would make a picture of their washing cup, Netilat Yadayim, and that's how it corresponds to my home. Then they might do the picture of the table in the Bet HaMikdash with the showbread, the Lechem Hapanim. And then they might make a picture next to it of my table at home, my Shabbat table with the dinner plates and chicken soup and so on. This is my table at home. And so on and so forth. The menorah, the candelabrum reflected the Torah books in the home. But there was one room in the Bet HaMikdash that was unique above all the other spaces in the temple. And that was the Holy of Holies, which housed the Ark. And inside were the 2 tablets of stone with the 10 commandments. Above these were 2 cherubim, one with the face of a girl and one with the face of a boy, which would face one another. Which room in our home reflects this room? Which room in our home reflects the cherubim facing one another and their wings outstretched to one another in embrace? And our rabbis tell us, astonishingly, this is the holiest room in the temple, and this reflects the master bedroom, the room where the husband and wife unite. And just as the divine presence rested between the 2 cherubim, between the 2 keruvim, similarly, when a husband and wife unite in great love and passion, and these are the words that are used, in great love and passion and longing and connection, and attraction to one another, and there's a bond between them, that is when the divine presence rests. So quite clearly, intimacy between a husband and wife is something very celebrated, something very special in Judaism. And yet, and it sounds very romantic and sounds very lovely and fantastic, and yet Judaism is a very practical religion as well. And just looking around us, particularly in this day and age, perhaps the institution of marriage does need some support. And in particular, passion and longing and desire between the couple is, fantastic. But how do we guarantee that those feelings are going to last not just the first year, but maybe in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30, 40, 50, till death do us part, for the entire duration of their married life? How do we keep those fires, that attraction burning alive? How do we keep that longing for one another. So for this, Judaism, the Torah has a scheme. And the scheme is called Taharat HaMishpacha. Taharat HaMishpacha, translated, means family purity. Because it doesn't just involve the couple, it actually affects the entire family. Chiefly just to give an outline of how it plays itself out. This is just merely a very, very brief outline. And again, if somebody wanted to delve into it further, they're encouraged to learn it more at length. But chiefly, it revolves around a woman's menstrual cycle. When she gets her period, the Torah enjoins a couple to separate and not have intimacy. And after her period, by counting in a particular way, she counts 7 days afterwards, again with the separation of where there's no intimacy, after which the woman immerses in a mikvah. And that night, it's a special mitzvah for a husband and wife to reunite. Now, looking at the face of a scheme like this, a person might think, are you talking 2021? Is this normal? How can a marriage thrive like this? Are you trying to make us celibate? Is that the point? But if we delve a little deeper, we can see, and I'd like to explore a few of the benefits that this type of scheme has within a marriage, and how it in fact enhances a marriage rather than detracts from it. Now, I'd just like to open with a disclaimer. And the disclaimer is, the truth is, the reason a Jew keeps a mitzvah, a God-given commandment, is quite frankly because God said so. It says so in his law. So we trust you, God. This is what you say. Okay, so I'll do it. However, in Hasidic thought, there is a concept of a bird with wings. And a bird has two wings. And one wing represents awe, and one represents love. The truth is, many people might keep this mitzvah because that's how they were taught to do it. And that's great. And that shows trust in the Almighty. After all, he fashioned us, he made our marriages, he introduced us to the love of our life. So we can trust him that this scheme will only enhance the bond between us. But there's another side of our heart, and it's very important to do these mitzvot out of a sense of appreciation, just to understand, what am I gaining from this? What is my marriage gaining from this? The truth is, keeping these laws are quite a commitment. There's counting, there's separation, there's preparing for the mikvah, there's going to the mikvah. It's a commitment in time, in emotions, in marital intimacy. It is quite a commitment. So it's very important that we appreciate what this commitment is about and what is in it for us and what is in it for our as women and what's in it for our marriages. How is this going to enhance my life as a woman and my life as a married woman together with my husband? I would just like to share with you a few words of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who expresses this as follows. And he writes like this: it's no secret that the Lubavitcher Rebbe was very involved in bringing Jews to their heritage and helping them appreciate the Torah and mitzvot and bringing them back to their birthright, which is a Jewish lifestyle. And he writes like this. He says, when attempting to introduce any mitzvah, any commandment to anyone, make sure to tell the person all the benefits that they're going to gain from this and all the blessings they're going to receive. Try your best to make this mitzvah beloved in their eyes. And I think that's very significant. You know, when you understand something, you appreciate it. And this is in fact reflected in the Hebrew words. The word for a reason or an explanation is a ta'am. Ta'am means a reason, the reason we do something. But as any balabasta and any good cook will know, the word ta'am also means taste. If you understand something, it gives you a good taste and a good feeling for it. And just over the years of teaching brides and women, I just have seen one cannot compare a woman who appreciates the beauty of this mitzvah and the benefits of this mitzvah to one who isn't informed. A woman who understands the beauty of this mitzvah does this mitzvah with love, appreciation. She just can't wait to embrace this mitzvah. She doesn't just have one wing of awe and fear of Hashem. She has a wing of love, and she is flying high. She can't wait to observe this mitzvah of mikvah. She can't wait to reunite with her husband, and this is God's gift to her marriage. So what I'd like to do with you this evening is just give you that high, give you the beauty of this mitzvah, which truly, looking at the world around us, is a gift wrapped by Hashem to every single Jewish woman and couple. So I just would like to start out with a few of the benefits. Again, falling back on the idea that the highest level really is to do it because God said so. We call this in Chabad, Kabbalat Ol. We do it, if you told me to do 20 jumping jacks a day, God, I'll do that too. That would be great for my, my diet and my waistline, right? If that's what you say, I'll do it. I trust you. And if this is a mitzvah, I'll do it. That is the highest level. On the other hand, we have what the Rebbe enjoined us to do is to make this mitzvah beloved, so we should understand the beauty and the benefits. So here goes. Let's say I invited you to my home for a week, and you're staying in my guest room, and I'm going to serve you meals. And every evening after supper, I give you this most delicious chocolate ice cream with caramel sauce. And if you like strawberry and coffee, we'll add that too. And you say, wow, this is delicious. And the first time you are just enjoying it. But let's say I give you that Sunday night, and I give that to you again on Monday night after supper, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 1 week, the next. After a week or two of this, you might say, thanks, but no thanks. I think I've had enough. Whereas, let's say I invite you to my home and I say to you, I've got this most delicious ice cream in my freezer waiting for you. It's chocolate, it's caramel, it's got coffee and cappuccino. Delicious, the Garden of Eden. But I'm only going to give it to you, hey, let's say 12 days time. And you think, hey, that's a little unusual. But there you are. I give you spaghetti and meatballs, and the next night I'm giving you, salmon and every other delectable dish. But at the back of your mind, you think, I can't wait to have that ice cream. And finally, on day number 12, when I open up the freezer and serve it to you, you will savor every lick. And it's a simple psychological formula. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. Something that we have all the time becomes a little familiar and perhaps a little jaded. And the worst thing that can happen in a marriage is if intimacy becomes too familiar and not special anymore. So what this scheme does is that it creates a natural break. And the beauty is that she doesn't have to say to her husband, sorry, honey, I'm not in the mood, I have a headache tonight, or invent another excuse, which might make him feel a little hurt. Here, if you want, it's God told us to do this. It's, if you want, quote unquote, it's his fault, as it were. There's no resentment because they're following a higher calling. So ingrained within the fabric of the marriage is a natural period of separation and closeness. And what that period of separation does is that it enhances the longing. When you can't have something like the ice cream, you find yourself looking forward to it. And finally, after approximately 5 days of a period and 7 days of counting, when they finally do reunite, that passion that they felt on their wedding night is reignited, and it happens month after month after month. I read an article in a magazine written by a man, actually, And he says, I'm not Orthodox. I actually go to a liberal synagogue, but my wife and I keep mikvah because it's like having a honeymoon every month. You can't buy that for anything. And that is one benefit that is embedded within this scheme. I want to share with you another benefit, and this one is a medical one. There was a doctor named Dr. Marie Stopes, an English doctor. She was a GP, and she actually wrote books that I actually got out of Wimbledon Library. And as a GP, she writes in a kind of antiquated English, I have to admit. She writes that, people would come to her for tonsillitis and for, whatever, an infection, and she would give them antibiotics and so on. She said, but at the same time, she kind of turned into almost like a therapist. They would come and they would tell her different difficulties and challenges. They had someone to talk to. And she found herself counseling them almost in their marital relationships. And one thing, and she wrote a book, and in one of the chapters, she addresses this to men. And she says, husbands, wouldn't you like to have a passionate, romantic, fiery marriage? Surely you would. So she said, let me give you a tip. And that tip is try and organize and try and aim to have a marital relationship, not just when you're in the mood, but when your wife is in the mood. Makes sense, right? So she said, well, you're going to ask me, I'm paraphrasing, by the way, I'm just adding a little bit of American flair to this. She said, well, you're going to ask me the $1 million question. Well, how do I know when is a woman most in the mood for this? And she said, I'll help you. And what she did in her own way, whether it was through interviews or through blood tests, but she recorded in a graph, she called it the peak of a woman's desire. Hormonally, when is a woman most in tune with marital intimacy? When is she most in the mood to be in bed with her husband? And she writes, and she actually shows the graph. And she said, during the period, again, this is not a hard and fast rule, but she's doing a general perspective. She writes that by and large, the graph dips, the peak of desire dips when a woman has her period. And after it climbs, it tends to climb up and reach a peak. And she said, interestingly, the peak of a woman's desire is exactly 7 days after her period. And then she writes, and I have the quote here, she says, this coincides precisely with the old Mosaic law, the Jewish law, whereby Orthodox, she says, Orthodox Jewish men and women, it's by no means limited to Orthodox Jewish men and women, separate for the time of the period and exactly 7 days afterwards. And she said this coincides, she noticed this, and she said this coincides precisely with hormonally when a woman is most hormonally in tune, her body is most in tune with marital intimacy. And she said this is a scheme that works. Here we are, I'll just read it to you. As will clearly be recognized, the old Jewish plan of having 12 clear days after the beginning menstruation before the next union is almost in exact harmony with the recurrence of a woman's desire as shown in my charts. So here we see it's a fact that she discovered. But if we look a little deeper, what does this mean? It means that the entire scheme revolves around when a woman is interested in intimacy. And that's a great statement of respect for a woman's feelings and needs. It just so happens, as it were, to coincide with a woman's hormonal yearnings, as it were, for intimacy. And that shows that the Torah and Judaism has great respect for a woman's marital needs. If you will, it could be that the husband might be interested and is waiting, but the Torah tells us we have to wait till the woman is emotionally ready for this. I'd like to share with you another medical fact, and this I saw in an article by a doctor called Dr. Alexander Gunn, not a Jewish doctor, and he points out that medically other studies have been done with Hadassah Hospital, doctors in Israel, that the rate of cervical disease amongst women who keep Taharat HaMishpacha is significantly lower worldwide. Now, they saw firstly that it was amongst the Jewish population, and they thought that this was due to circumcision. But in fact, there are other cultures which circumcise, and they had the same level, same statistics as everyone else. It was just in the Jewish population that this protection was noticed. And he explains it as follows, and I'll read it to you. He says, the incidence of infection in Jewish women was thought, I'm reading this article, that circumcision in men prevented women to being exposed to smegma, which was causing the infection. But in fact, he writes, Jewish principles which require couples to abstain from intercourse for a certain number of days after the end of menstruation may be playing their part in protecting the woman, because the cells on the surface of the cervix are most susceptible to damage just after menstruation. And medically, normally the vaginal canal is acidic and repels germs, but when a woman menstruates, the uterine lining is shed and her uterus is very exposed, and at that time is very susceptible to infection if anything should enter in it, such as in intercourse. And he writes, how long does it take for the natural acidity? And when a woman menstruates, the fluids in her vagina are alkali. How long does it take for them to revert back to acidity and for the uterus to regain its natural protection against infection? He writes 7 days. And he said this is no coincidence. The scheme of the separation and of going to the mikvah is actually protecting the woman's health. So again, it might be a random fact, but if we delve into it and we examine it, what we see here is quite phenomenal, that the whole marital union revolves around when it's healthy, not just emotionally, but physically healthy for a woman. And don't forget, the Torah was given over 3,300 years ago, when women's, worldwide, when there was paganism, women didn't have many rights. And this was a statement of extraordinary respect to a woman's physical and emotional needs. I just would like to examine another benefit. And that is, some people say, okay, we see the advantage, but what on earth are you supposed to do with your husband for 12 days? Like talk about the weather, watch the news? Like, isn't this boring? But in fact, and again, therapists will often suggest this, during a time when a couple can't be physically intimate, then they're very much coaxed, as it were, to discover other parts to themselves. He doesn't just look at her as gorgeous in bed, and she doesn't look at him as, being able to perform in bed and providing gratification and pleasure, but they actually talk to each other, not via WhatsApp. They can talk, they can take a walk together. Suddenly he discovers in her intelligence, dreams, opinions, goals, aims in life. There's a whole deeper inner world, not just inside her, but inside him. And they have a chance to discover this deeper or other part of themselves when they're not intimate. And this just encourages the respect for one another to grow. My husband is a rabbi, and in many times at his desk, he's had couples who've said exactly this. They don't feel the attraction anymore. And now that the kids are in uni, we don't know what to talk about. Whereas if from the very beginning, they've been practicing and discovering other and deeper parts of themselves and respecting and appreciating other parts of our personalities, then when they're older, then they don't have a problem relating. And this actually enhances marriage. We don't just want marriage to be passionate and glorious and fireworks just for the first few years. We want this to last forever. And when the couple have a chance to discover the other side of themselves, then both sides are enhanced. The passion is alive, and also the respect is very, very much present. And I think that's a very, very important ingredient in a successful marriage. So those are many different benefits that Taharat HaMishpacha, that the period of separation, the days of the period and the 7 days of separation. Again, I just want to emphasize that it's quite straightforward, but one does need to learn how to go about it. And if anyone is interested, I encourage you to, you can turn to Alana, and she could perhaps match you up with someone who can teach you more about these laws. But the general idea is that this separation, the separateness and then together, brings a very beautiful harmony and thriving the marriage. The marriage doesn't just survive, it thrives, it pulsates, it's passionate 1 year after another, after many, many years. And again, there are many benefits to a woman, and women can appreciate this to a much deeper degree because it's a sign of God's deep respect for our needs within a marriage. But I want to just go up one more level. We've discovered many unique ideas about mikvah and the beauty of mikvah, but there's one level that that we haven't mentioned, that I want to open the door to a secret garden. And that is as follows. We're doing this because it's a mitzvah. The word mitzvah in Hebrew means a commandment. However, the Torah has also been translated into Aramaic, which is an ancient tongue, an ancient language. Interestingly, the word for mitzvah as translated in Aramaic doesn't mean a commandment, it means a connection. And every time we do a mitzvah, it's not just God saying, please do this, do that, put on tefillin, light your Shabbat candles. What God is saying, this will connect you, not just to me, but will connect you to something higher. And every mitzvah opens up a channel of energy. So for example, if a person gives charity, it says you open up a channel, if you give charity, you open up a certain channel in heaven, as it were, and it opens a pipeline, and the blessings of prosperity just gush forth. Different mitzvot open up different channels. So for example, Shabbat candle lighting. We're told that when a woman lights the Shabbat candles, she draws down, she opens up the channels of energy of peace, harmony, tranquility, protection, light in her home. When a woman separates the challah from the dough, the bread dough, again, this is a mitzvah. You might just think it's a commandment, do this, but it's a lot more than that. It's so much deeper and higher than that. She's turning on a tap of energies and forces, which in the case of separating the challah dough are connected with physical, material abundance, nourishment, and livelihood. We're told when a woman does this particular mitzvah of keeping mikvah and keeping it correctly, she opens up a channel of energy that is beyond anything else. It's very, very powerful. And the energies that when she does this, we're told, our rabbis tell us that when a woman immerses in the mikvah, the heavens are open to any prayer that she utters. This, by the way, holds true also of lighting Shabbat candles and separating the dough. But uniquely to mikvah, it's actually a mitzvah that's all-encompassing. You know, there are many different mitzvot. Men put tefillin here and here. And Maimonides says that when we do a mitzvah, we sanctify certain parts of our body. So they sanctify their head and their arm. A woman does it in one go. And because it's so powerful, it's such a powerful holiness, what she does, she's opening such a very sublime channel of energy, and just blessings pour forth, whether it's in marriage, shalom bayit, harmony between them. We're told this affects the nachat from children and many other blessings. I have to say that in addition to being a kala teacher or teaching brides about this, as well as women of all ages about this beautiful mitzvah, I also happen to be a mikvah attendant. We have a mikvah for many years. We lived in a house and it was in our back garden. Now it's part and parcel of our Chabad house. And I can tell you the mikvah has been here for over 30 years, thank God. And may it continue to be for many more years. And the women tell me, I can sit for another session entirely and tell you incredible stories of women that tell me that, you know, Sarah, what I prayed for, it materialized. I can't, she said, I don't understand it. One woman, I don't know, her son was supposed to, whatever, have an operation. So she prayed so hard and the doctor said, the x-ray is clear. I can sit and tell you stories of women that tell me, and they don't do anything else. They just sit back and watch the Broadway show. They just sit back, they commit. It is a commitment. And there's no question it's a commitment of separation, and it takes two to tango. It's not just the woman. It needs obviously the consent and the blessings of the husband as well. But the blessings and the energies that they just unleash into their marriage, they come and tell me this. I have so many just very lovely and gorgeous stories. One woman was worried, you know, there was just one very cute story of a woman who was teaching the Bat Chayil in a certain United Synagogue cheder. She was teaching, you know, the group of girls there. And she also used to come to my mikveh every year to show the Bat Chayil class the mikveh, you know, it was part of their curriculum. And when she came, I'll just call her Barbara, that's not her real name. She'd say, girls, mikveh is so special, it's so amazing. You've got to come and meet Sarah Dubov before you get married. Anyway, I said to her, you know, Barbara, you're a better saleswoman than I am, you know. You should be giving the talk here, but I don't really see you. And she said to me, she said, you know, I was married long before you came to South London. There was no mikveh here, so I didn't have the chance. I didn't go to the mikveh, but I want these girls to. And I actually told her that as a woman who's menopausal, she still has a chance to go once to the mikveh. And she was ecstatic. She was so happy to do this mitzvah. To cut a long story short, I taught her how to do it. And she found, we made an appointment for her, and she came to immerse in my mikveh. Now, as I got to know her, she told me that unfortunately she was going to lose her job as Bat Chayil teacher because there weren't enough girls in the class next year. And the cheder education committee wanted to fire her and just send the girls, you know, they wanted to release her and send the girls to the next United Synagogue Bat Mitzvah class. And she said to me, you know, I would really be so sorry to lose this job. It's my heart and soul. This is my contribution to the Jewish people. Now, unbeknownst to her, as she was in the mikveh, there was actually, my husband was actually the head teacher in that cheder, and there was a cheder education committee in my dining room the night she was going to the mikveh. Of course, the blinds were drawn. Nobody knew who was in the mikveh. I just said to my husband, I've got a mikveh appointment tonight. He said, I've got an education meeting. Fine. I sorted the kids out, homework, bed, bath, etc. And I went out to do the appointment with her. And I said to her, like I said to you, you can pray. I told Barbara, you can pray. After she immersed, she prayed for a long time, and I gave her a big hug. Well done. Anyway, I went back into my home, and I couldn't help overhearing the meeting. I don't usually eavesdrop on meetings, ladies, I have to admit, but on this occasion, I just had to pass by, and suddenly, I kid you not, I overhear my husband saying, okay, the next item on the agenda, Bat Chayil class and Barbara's class. We only have 2 girls for the next year. Should we amalgamate with the next cheder in the next town, or should we keep Barbara? Right, we've got a lot of items on the agenda, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, let's take a show of hands. There's 8 of us here. Right, 5 in favor of keeping her, 3 against. Okay, she's in. And I never do this, but I ran right back out, right around the driveway, and I knocked on the door and I said, Barbara, she said, is everything okay? I said, I don't usually do this, but I have to tell you what just happened. I said, you've got your job back. She said, what? She said, I just prayed for that when I was in the mikvah. I prayed for a lot of other things, my husband, my kids, my family, but that was one of the things that I prayed for. And it was an incredible moment because it literally took, 120 seconds for her to utter this prayer and it to be answered. It was a very special moment. That's just one story amongst many where women tell me that they see that it opens many channels of energy. So in addition to all the wonderful benefits, the benefits to ourselves as women, to our bodies, our health, our emotions, our marriages, our connection with our husband in a, how should I say, perhaps a more platonic way, which enhances the marriage, perhaps in later years. In addition to all these wonderful benefits, which are being given to us just as a gift, God says, you know, when you do this mitzvah, I'll bless you in addition. And all the blessings are yours when you keep it. And this is a gift that is the birthright of every Jewish woman. And I hope I've shared this gift with you in an adequate and an appropriate way. I'd like to encourage you to accept the gift, unwrap it, and enjoy it for the rest of your married life. So thank you, ladies, for your attention. And over to you, Ilana.
I got sent in a question that I wanted to
Sure.
ask. It was from earlier on, so it might not be relevant to what you just said. Let me just put it up. Okay. Oh, it was regarding when people have the 12 days off. So when we have our cycle and we keep 12 days away from our husbands. So the question goes like this. What would you say to a lady who, in today's age, we're in 2021, where it's all about women empowerment, and they're encouraging us to be strong, you know, emotionally, physically, sexually, everything. You know, so this said lady, she's not worried about ways to get out of intimacy. She doesn't have to say, oh, I've got a headache tonight. She's not worried about any of that. She's quite happy to say, no husband, not tonight, don't want it. And she enjoys being able to have it when she has it and not keeping the laws. And she's still learning about it. So for her and her marriage, why should she keep the laws? Why does it help her if it's not needed for her marriage? Because she's quite happy to say, no, I can say no on my own. I don't need the laws to tell me I need a break. I know when I need a break. Why should she keep the laws? How will it help her marriage?
Okay, that's an excellent question. And indeed, when presenting all these benefits, there is a drawback in saying, well, those benefits don't apply to me, so why bother? But for that's when we go up a level and we say this is a commandment in the Torah. And just as we know that that God created us and he knows what's best for us, in this scheme, we can trust that this is the best for our marriage. But in addition, even if she feels it doesn't enhance her marriage in any way, and it's not going to affect her relationship with her husband in any way, there are still the spiritual benefits and the connection with God and the blessings that brings that only this mitzvah can bring. So even if the benefits don't apply and don't speak to her, that's okay. But on the level of keeping it as a mitzvah and purely as a mitzvah, there are many benefits to doing that just solely because it's a mitzvah. So I would say that's actually a much higher level. And I would say also to someone like this, it's not an all or nothing mitzvah. It doesn't mean you have to commit for the rest of your life. Amen. Of course, that's the aim. But if someone is new at this and I always say, try it out for a few months, maybe 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, just to see how it feels and how it affects you. One shouldn't feel that it's an all or nothing. And so that's how I would encourage her. So even if these benefits don't speak to you, that's okay. They're limited. They're limited intellectually. They're the benefits that are limited, whereas the Torah is it's from an infinite God, and being that he created us, we trust that he knows what's best for our marriage. But as I said, so many blessings ensue when a person when a couple keeps this, and it might not be apparent to the visual eye, to the naked eye. But I would love to recommend for her to try it and just see if there's any metamorphosis, if there's any change.
Okay, great. I just got sent another question.
Mm-hmm.
If someone is they've gone through menopause, why is the mitzvah still allowed, and why only just once?
Okay. The reason the mitzvah is still allowed is because even if a woman got her period many years ago, she still hasn't undergone the transformation of tahara, of the transformation that the mikvah provides. When a woman immerses in the mikvah, it's compared to the waters of the womb in a way, and she goes from the state of nida into a state of tahara, which is like a rebirth, and that brings purity. One thing I did want to share, which I didn't, is that the terms purity and impurity are very mistranslated. It's a certain state of being, and it doesn't reflect hygiene or cleanliness or in any way. But if a woman got her period many years ago, even if, or even last year or 5 or 10 years ago, she still can go to the mikveh in order to gain that transformation of tahara, of purity. So even if it was many years ago, she still has that opportunity. In fact, if she didn't manage to go all the years of her marriage, but she goes this once, retroactively, it can also have an effect in the way of the spiritual effect on her marriage. So if this woman would like to keep this mitzvah, I do encourage. And the reason it happens only once is because she no longer has her menstrual cycle. By definition, a woman who's in menopause no longer gets her menstrual cycle. So if she stopped however many months or years ago, yes, she should go once. And I have had many women come to my mikveh that never knew about this mitzvah, and they would like to do it just the once. And it's a very, very special experience. And yes, it brings all the blessings with it. But by definition, because she no longer gets her menstrual cycle, that's why it doesn't continue.
Okay, very good. Another question. If it's for 7 days after the period, why do those with a shorter period still need to keep longer?
Okay, so that actually goes into technicalities of Jewish law. By and large, generally speaking, a woman does have a 5-day cycle. However, there are women who have a shorter cycle. The reason for the 5-day separation, without going into too much halachic literature, is because when a couple are intimate and she has the seed of the husband in her, that would contraindicate the 7 pure days. And it says it will take this amount of time to, how should I say, for the seed of the man not to interfere with her 7 clean days. So it's not just about the period, it's actually about separating from intimacy before those 5 days begin. Right? I hope that's clear. It's not just to do with bleeding with a period. It actually has to do with the body ridding itself of any seed from the husband before the 7 days can begin. So, and it's deeply rooted in, how should I say, halachic literature, but that's how should I say, the basic premise.
Okay, so I'm actually not sure if I understood that. Are you saying the seed from before the cycle began?
Yeah, so let's say they were intimate, then there will be, halachically, there will be the seed of the husband still within her, and that being active can interfere with the 7 days. And halachically, it takes these 5 days to clear that.
Okay, interesting. Okay, another question. How can it be that Sephardi, Ashkenazi, and Lubavitch all have different rules with harchakas as well as amount of days to keep?
Okay, so the basic premise of Taharat HaMishpacha, of keeping mikveh, is the same. And the counting in its premise is the same. However, over the years, different nuances in the laws of keeping it have evolved. The basic premise is the same, but every woman, every couple should go according to their family tradition, to the synagogue or rabbi that guides them. But essentially the premise is the same, and it's just differences and there are certain other differences in Jewish law when it comes to Ashkenazic tradition and Sephardi tradition. And again, this also plays itself out in these laws as well. It doesn't mean that one keeps it and one does not. God forbid, everyone keeps the basic laws of Taharat Mishpacha, but they're just different nuances that evolved over the years in rabbinic literature, different rabbis with certain different opinions that this is, this applies, this doesn't apply. But as I said, the basic premise applies.
Okay, fine. Getting questions now.
Okay.
On a roll. Someone on contraception wouldn't be able to appreciate the mitzvah fully, as one doesn't get the period as frequent or on time. May terminate fully. In this case, obviously, one has been told to be on contraception. One has to wait. Does one have to wait until they are fully off to fully appreciate?
Okay, so to that, I would say if a person is on contraception with rabbinical guidance and they were told that they have to be on contraception, our lives are ruled by divine providence. By the way, we also have the 9 months of pregnancy when a woman doesn't have a period. And some women, not a hard and fast rule across the board, but some women also might, when they're nursing, might not have a menstrual cycle for a certain number of months or for a certain amount of time. So, for this, we just trust that divine providence is governing our cycle. And if this particular woman is on contraception, then that's also by divine providence, and her marriage will not be detracted or lacking in any way because of that. Because that's, if she's doing it again with the guidance of a rabbi, then that is what's right for them.
Okay. This question kind of goes back to the previous question regarding waiting the 7 days, even if you have a shorter period. So regarding the 7-day wait for the seed to disappear, what happens if they didn't actually have relations for that week or even before that? So let's say they last intimate on their last mikvah night. Do they still have to wait?
I would say the laws are, how should I say, always return to a rabbi for guidance. When it's straightforward, you have your period and you count a certain number of days and you count the 7 days, that's pretty straightforward. If anything is, how should I say, out of the box, I would just say turn to a rabbi for guidance. I just want to, how should I say, reassure that rabbis that deal with these questions are extremely sensitive, respectful, and non-judgmental. And a woman should never hesitate to ask. They help many couples in with many different questions. It could be a simple question, such as the one that you just, not a simple one, but just a straightforward question, such as the one you just described. And I would just say, as with everything in Judaism, sometimes we need some guidance in keeping these laws. And I would say, don't hesitate to pick up the phone and ask.
Okay. Another one is, if you're no longer having periods, how do you keep the intimate relationship fresh?
Again, so I would say that it doesn't have to be with menopause. Sometimes a woman might have a hysterectomy or for other reasons might not be menstruating anymore. Again, through that we view our lives as divine providence. And if this is what's happening with my body, then it must mean then I don't need the separation for my marriage. And God feels that we don't need it for our marriage. If halachically it's not called for and it's not, one isn't required to, then that's a sign that this couple doesn't need it. How to enhance the marriage is perhaps they can also just use the same off again, on again, and through communication, through mutual communication, see what their needs are and seek to fulfill each other's needs in marital intimacy. So if they don't have mikvah because she's no longer menstruating, then I would say then This is God's gift to you in this particular stage in your marriage. Enjoy it.
Very good. That's it. No more questions for now then.
Okay, so thank you again, Alana, and thank you, ladies.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you so much.
I just want to add, if any, Alana has my number. If anybody would like to turn to me privately to ask something, I'm very happy to try and enlighten and help and advise. So thank you so much for the honor of speaking to you all tonight.
Thank you so much. This is a voluntary thing, so Sarah Dubov has given up her time, so I really appreciate that, Sarah. Thank you so much.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you, Alana, for the honor and privilege.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. Good night, everyone. Thank you for joining. Bye.
Thank you.